Hey, good afternoon, Anand.
Good afternoon, Stanley.
Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Yeah,
Glad
and
to be here.
yeah. So as agreed, I'd like to ask you for permission to be able to record this coaching session to be able to share online as well in classroom for educational purpose to bring more awareness to coaching.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you for the permission. And before we start, let's take a few deep breaths, calm ourselves down, and let me know once you are ready.
Can do. Let's begin.
Okay. So then for today's conversation, what would you like to talk about that is of importance to you?
I would like to discuss two alternative partners I have here for a new venture that I'm considering in Sydney. So they are two quite intelligent, capable people who want to be part of this venture. And I think I need to come to a conclusion as to who may be the better choice.
Okay. May I have your permission to reflect back what I heard?
Yes.
Yeah, so I hear a few things. One, you have two partners, two alternative partners in it for a venture in Australia. Two, you are deciding between these two. And three, you would need to make a decision to choose one. How does
Correct.
it sound?
Correct. Correct.
So in today's conversation, what would be the focus of this topic?
I think it should be the decision-making criteria. I want to be objective and make sure it's the right choice for the right reasons. So, what would be the decision-making criteria for selection, and therefore who would rank higher would be the preferred choice.
Hmm? And what would be a good outcome you hope to achieve at the end of the session?
I think to determine some sort of questionnaire, or at least a list of 3 to 6 key questions in order to rank the two choices I have.
Okay. So when you mention decision-making criteria to know the right choice for the right reason, what do you mean by right?
So, right in this case would be what is right for the establishment, expansion, and ultimately the exit of the business. So, right in this case is what's best for business, to begin with, and to ultimately exit, or at least dilute some of the equity in the venture.
Okay. So when you mention you want to find out the decision-making criteria, what would this criteria look like if you were to know?
I think it would have 2 or 3 parts to it. One would be the financial resources, because partnership involves investment, of course. I think the second would be the operational involvement in terms of how much time they could put in and not just money into the venture. And I think the third would be the alignment on how far this business can be grown, right? How much can we develop it to its full potential? So I think these three would be the key things. There would be smaller considerations, but I think if the smaller stuff is right, but the big stuff is not, then it wouldn't matter. I think it's critical to get the bigger things in alignment first.
Hmm? What's hindering you so far?
I'm not sure I'm actually hindered by it. I think I've started, but it's coming to a conclusion is what I need. I'm not particularly hindered by thinking clearly or getting to a decision.
Okay. And you mentioned the word ranking.
Yes.
So what makes ranking important?
You know, the truth is, firstly, they're both great partners potentially, right? So I think ranking is something I'm keeping in mind for the future, because in future we will need more partners, because as the venture grows, it will need more hands. So I think ranking is important, because whoever ranks second, in my estimation, is only second for now, right? Ultimately, over the next few months or a year or so, there would be room for a third, for sure.
Okay, understood. And what has to happen for you to be able to rank?
I think so. As you know, as we were discussing earlier, I think I'd need to look at the financial contribution, the operational contribution, and the vision alignment. And in order to do that fairly, I think I need to have. So I've had a very advanced discussion with one of the potential partners, but the second one, I haven't gone into as much detail. So I think the first thing required would be for me to give a bit more disclosure in terms of financial forecasts and expectations to one partner that I haven't. That would get them on a more even keel in terms of information. And then we could have the conversation about partnership. So I think the immediate thing would be to get them both on the same page in terms of information disclosure. Yeah.
Okay, so by when will you do it?
So I'm actually scheduled to have dinner with him on Thursday night, so day after tomorrow. And I think I should maybe break away from dinner for a half an hour or so and have this conversation. So Thursday, I think, is doable, most certainly. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm just curious if both partners are able to contribute the same for all these three, then how would you have to, choose them or rank them differently?
Mm.
What else
Mm.
could be used?
So I think existing networks and maybe family background in business is definitely a key consideration, because one of the partners is very well established in Sydney in particular. His father has run a very well established business. So I think the reputational benefit of his association would be greater. So, like you said, all things being equal, this would probably be a tipping point in the decision making. You know, one guy does have a stronger network, more of a brand or a family reputation to draw down from,
Mm,
which could facilitate expansion a lot quicker. Yeah.
okay, understood. Thank you for sharing. So earlier you mentioned this Thursday you would um, have a discussion with the other partner that you'll be meeting in order to bring him to the same page. Yeah. So after you do that, what's next?
I think that the immediate next step would be a hard discussion about the capital investment, you know, and passing that hurdle. If one is able to and the other is unable to, or if someone is able to do it at a particular time and not today, I would have to align that in terms of our view of when we should be launching this business. So I think a hard capital discussion would be kind of the first hurdle. And then very quickly, the operational time that either of these person could devote for the first launch.
Okay. So when you say operational time, will you be able to quantify or?
Yeah, I think good question. Yeah, because everyone's occupied with their existing commitments, right? I think this would, in the design and preparation stage, which would be, say, 30 days, yeah, this would surely need at least an hour a day, right? So we know what we're doing. We've done it in other markets. So we're not really starting from scratch. We're just localizing a lot of the assumptions. So that would be an hour a day. At launch, I think the operational involvement would be anywhere between 2 to 4 hours, 5 days a week for the first 90 days. Yeah.
Hmm. And earlier you also mentioned first thing to do is to have a hard discussion about capital investment.
Correct.
What do you mean by hard?
I think a very, so both are sort of, there's long-term friendships there as well. So I think a hard decision is that, the venture requires money, and it's something I'm quite particular, with in terms of partnerships, that you got to have skin in the game. So just by an association of being old business colleague or old friend, uh, you could get a free pass, perhaps a delayed payment of some sort, but it can't be getting in the game for nothing. So I think a hard discussion means, the venture is going to cost $100 to launch, and we've got to give equity in this company based on the capital investment, right? So if you want half of the company as a partner, you got to put in $50. If that's not your capacity, then what is, and what does that mean in terms of equity? And is that then valuable enough for me to pursue it with, right? So
Mhm.
I think it's that, to just establish how much equity, and is that acceptable to me? Yeah.
Okay. So have you thought about what you will be saying in that conversation?
I mean, I'll be walking them through a spreadsheet.
Mm.
So, we have modeled capital expenditure assumptions as well as P&L forecasted,
Okay.
So it's fairly guided by data. Yeah, yeah. And these are both experienced, intelligent business people. So they look at the numbers for what it is.
Yes, great.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier on that the decision is to have some sort of a list of 3 to 6 key questions
Correct.
in order for them, for you to rank what would these key questions look like.
Yeah. I think, like we're discussing, right? It's
Mm.
it's financial resource, it's operational uh, availability and alignment to the vision or the expansion of the business. So that would be
So the key questions will be within these three.
within these three sort of environments, these three areas. Yes, yes.
Okay, got it. So at this point of time in the conversation, um, would you like to explore the pros and cons of each potential partner?
Yes, I think
What they
that's a
could
good idea.
what they
Yeah,
could bring
yeah.
to the business. So we just call them partner A, partner B. So
B,
for partner
yes.
A, what do you think will be the pros and cons of working with him?
I think, so I guess you could put this in sort of qualitative and quantitative. Yeah. Uh, the it would be definitely, he has built more than one successful business and exited it. Yeah. Operationally strong. I think a great people person. So most folks who meet this guy love him in the first meeting, and that breaks down a lot of barriers, right? When you're entering a new market. So those are definitely the pros. The con that really stands out with him is that he is very, very time poor, right? So it's a con only because he can't allocate time, not because it's bad in itself. I think that's one thing. For partner B, the pros are, I suspect that he has more time available. Again, thinking positively with the pros, a very unemotional business decision maker, right? So he has created a lot of his wealth in crypto trading. So he doesn't get married to the position. He looks at the data, what it does, and goes. So I think that side of him would keep me a little bit more curbed in my enthusiasm, right? I think the cons with him is he's never owned and operated his own business. So he has worked in large organizations. He's a very successful trader, but he hasn't really been an entrepreneur as such. So I don't know if he would have the stomach for, bad cash flow months that to people like us is predictable, right? Because the volatility of the year, but it may give him a bit of a shock. So I don't want to be managing, those kind of basic questions, I suppose. Yeah. So they both have more strengths than weaknesses. Yeah.
What are you learning so far?
I'm learning that, I think the positive is that coming down to these two was a good choice. What I am learning is that I think something's going to have to give,
Mm.
right? And I need to determine what that is. I probably need to give more operational time to it myself to launch and establish it for the first few months and then hand it over. And besides the hard facts, right, of the capital resource, the ability, and the three things we discussed, I'm starting to think that if I need to make up in operational time, then who would be still the better choice? Yeah.
Mm. So earlier you mentioned for partner A, um, is not at the best at allocating time. So if you really were to partner with him, how would you be able to counter or address this?
This not so much he's poor at allocating time. He doesn't have the time
Oh,
to allocate, or doesn't have as much time to allocate. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. To counter that, we've sort of had that discussion, and I think he's asking for a lot of support at the launch phase, and once it stabilizes a bit, I can hand it over. And I have confidence in that. I don't think it's someone trying to get someone else to do a harder bit of work or anything to that sort of effect. I think he's just genuinely no time till Q1 next year. Yeah. So that's where it's at. Yeah.
So for partner B, you mentioned about because he doesn't have experience with a business before,
Correct.
might be bad months with cash flow,
Yeah.
not being at the mark. Um, what has to happen for you to better prepare him?
I think I should just put that on the table, right? When I'm having this conversation with him, and just call it out as a foreseeable situation and see maybe what his preliminary response is. So if it makes him nervous or if it rattles him too much, then I can sort of probably dig a bit deeper, you know. So yeah, I think maybe prepare him better. Tell him what to expect on. So generally, when we do these P&L discussions, we look at it annualized, right? We just say, okay, here's what year one looks like, and year two, three, four, five. Yeah. I think in order to prepare him better with this, probably need to give him a monthly forecast for year one. And as I'm speaking to you, I think he'd have the stomach for it. Maybe it's the surprise that's a bigger shock for him rather than the value. So yeah, I think maybe a second layer P&L breakdown instead of annual, by month. Yeah.
Okay. So just to summarize and reflect back what you said earlier, there are a few criteria. One is financial commitment. Two is operational commitment. Three is aligning for how far the business can grow. And four, other criteria will include existing network, and five, family background.
Right.
Yeah. So besides all these five, what else?
I think this would be it. If I look for more things, I think they can all be learned or adjusted along the way. But for an early launch, an early commitment, these are the big ones.
Okay. So within these five, would you be able to offhand think of any key questions that might fit?
Yeah, on a high level, I can. I think I probably need to maybe take 15, 20 minutes alone to pen these thoughts down. Yeah.
Got it. What sort of resources or support do you need?
I think some private time, a cup of coffee, and the Excel spreadsheet. I think because we're also data driven, the numbers will raise their own questions. And because I know them both personally and I know their business personalities, I could almost anticipate which guy would ask what. So I should probably just document that for myself, knowing with fair amount of accuracy what their questions would be.
Interesting. By when will you do this?
That doesn't give me much time, right? If we've got dinner on Thursday, that means tomorrow I have a full day. I'll have to allocate some time on Thursday morning or Thursday afternoon to prepare for this. Yeah. With one of the partners at least.
So will you be able to share some of your takeaways for today's conversation?
Yeah. I think some of the key takeaways, that kind of expanded my thinking in conversation was, all things being equal, what are the other couple of considerations that could tip one in favor of the other? I think that was a clear takeaway. I think the extra level of P&L review with partner B, for what I currently perceive as one of his challenges or weaknesses, but it may very well not be the case. So I got to give him the benefit of the doubt and put that conversation on the table with him. And I think really the third thing is really the preparedness for going into that conversation with him on Thursday. I think if I want to really make it count and get to a conclusion quicker, I shouldn't really wing that conversation, right? I should take some time off in some solitude, and plan that monthly level P&L, and what are the questions that I could ask around those 5 environments. Yeah, those would be the big 3 I've taken away.
So what will success look like for you?
Success will look like both of them wanting to say yes and me having to tell one of them that, yeah, hold that thought for 6 months, buddy. that would really be success. Although I know I'm trying to decide on one, I think the big one would be getting both in. I think in terms of one selection, what success looks like is, I think knowing the time constraints, I think success looks like a capital commitment to begin with. And then we work through the phases as we get close to launching. Yeah.
So you mentioned that eventually there might be both.
Yes.
What's stopping you currently from onboarding both?
So I've thought about this. There's a couple of considerations. I think the primary one is I don't want to let too many equity partners in too early, right? Because the earlier you get in, the cheaper you get in, right? Now, I'm okay with sharing if everybody carries their own weight. But I think with the size of the launch that we are planning, to have 3 go at one time is probably a little bit too much, and especially if both of them are time poor and all they're going to give me is money and I'm going to put in money and all the time for 3 people, it's bad business, right? So yeah, I think that's why it's just too early to let a third in.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So what are more actions you could take?
I think these are appropriate for now. If I'm thinking ahead and it gets to a stage where they both confirm their interest and involvement, I think thinking ahead a little bit, I should probably get all of us in a room or a dinner table together, uh, keeping those channels open for what I think would be necessary in the future, that would just keep our readiness. So if there's a capital call for another expansion, I don't need to do the alignment later, right? All 3 are well acquainted and we just put in the call and say, hey, now's the time. Are you good? Let's go. So I think for the immediate future, the actions remain what we have discussed. If I'm thinking a bit ahead, then I think the 3 of us should get better acquainted. Yeah, because partner A has never met partner B. Yeah, and I'm sure they'll get along. It's just a question of me initiating that.
Yes. So Anand, would you be able to summarize your overall learning from this conversation?
Yes. I think like I mentioned, it's quite a likely outcome, as you suggested, that all things could be equal if I only go on 3 criteria. So definitely I've identified a valuable 4th and 5th. And I think the second key thing is the extra level of visibility I would need to provide to partner B who's never run his business. I think those are the 2 key parts of our discussion today. Both very helpful to the situation, actually. Yeah.
So would there be any potential obstacles that can pop up and off-track you?
From having these conversations, I don't think so. No, there are some other variables to the launch, but no, for the subject of this discussion, nothing.
So is there anything else you'd like to say about this topic before we close the session?
I think I'm good. I think we've covered it in adequate detail.
That's great. Thanks so much, Anand. We have your permission to conclude the session.
Absolutely. Thank you too, Stanley.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you.